When I was 24, I purchased my first property. It was only an investment property. I just wanted to buy a house because I grew up in a real estate family and I love real estate and I believe in the wealth it could bring you later. And I wanted to buy a house, but I had no money. So I purchased this property with $0 out of my pocket. In fact, the seller gave me $1 to make the transaction, I don't want to say binding, but legal, I guess. There has to be some sort of compensation on a contract. So he gave me $1. But it wasn't through some magical way of doing it. It was a lot of hard work is what we did. So how I found this seller, I remember I was 24 and I wasn't really selling real estate very seriously at the time. I was kind of half in real estate, half in trying to invest. And I learned about a way of buying, of taking over somebody's payments. Now, when you do that, you can't really choose where you're buying. So what I did was I bought a list of home sellers that were FSBO. And mind you, this is back in 2011. So there were a lot more for sale by owners, FSBO, back then than there are now in 2021. But I got a list, or I paid for a company to send me a list of the aggregate of all the online for sale by owners on Zillow, on Trulia, on all those sites, on forsalebyowner.com, whatever, and then send me the list. And I put that list onto a big spreadsheet, and then I would color code the spreadsheet, like gray, I haven't talked to yet, green, I have talked to and they're interested, as I called them. And I didn't have an office at the time, so I would go to my dad's house after working through the day, and I do 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day for about 6 months, dialing every single one of these numbers and seeing how much they would potentially sell their home for and whether they'd be interested in potentially selling it a creative way rather than the conventional way where I give your money now and you take your money and leave and I get the property. And it took 6 months of dialing to find this particular homeowner who had a past in real estate, so he understood what I was talking about when I was like, hey, I would like to take over your payments. I would like to pay your payments for you for a certain period of time and then eventually refinance you out of them, and that's when you get the majority of your money. So as I'm telling this to you now, you can imagine that most folks, when they hear that, they're like, no, I just want to sell my house. And then at that point the conversation's over. You try to explain to them, but this is how you sell your house now, because by the way, this was 2011. There was hundreds of homes on the market and thousands of homes on the market, but nobody buying them. So this particular individual, my seller, he had 3 levels of stairs in this property, and he was getting older with his wife and they didn't love the stairs. And he had to net a certain amount of it. The property was probably worth about $275,000 at the time, and he wanted $315,000 for it. And that's why it wasn't selling, right? 1, you've got all these sellers in this market. 2, they all want more than the property's worth, and then 3, there's no buyers, right? So these folks would have their homes sit and sit and sit. But generally speaking, paying $315,000 for a property that's worth $275,000 is not a good idea. However, if you find yourself in a situation where this particular one was, and I'll tell you why, then jump on it. So, like, the purchase price that I paid for this home was $315,000. It was only worth $275,000. He had a loan on it of around 200 and let me do the math here. He had 2 loans adding up to about the 275. What's 315 minus 40? 25. Yeah, he had 2 loans on it of about 375 or 275, and he wanted the extra $40,000 on top of that. That was his net, right? And so, but the cool thing about this property was $150,000 of that $275 he owed was on a HELOC with a really reasonable interest rate and a really low payment for the next 6 years. So I'd have to pay him back in, this was 2011 or 2012, I'd have to pay him back in 2017, 2018, or pay that off. And then his first loan, which was the other portion of that, so it was 275 minus 150, like 125,000. The other loan was a 15-year loan that he was already in year 9 of. So there were 6 years left on that loan as well. And because of that, and because it was a 15-year loan, he was paying off $1,200 at the time of principal every month. So he was already past most of the oh my gosh, not insurance. What's the word I'm looking for?
Interest.
Yeah, interest. Thank you. He was already past most of the interest payments in it, and he was only paying $1,200 of principal down every month, and that raised every month. Next year was $1,250. The year after that it was $1,300. The year after that was $1,350. $1,200 times 12 payments of that is 12 times 12, 144. So call it 14,000-ish a year paying down in principal. So if I could get this seller to agree to allow me to make his payments for him, I would pay $14,000 down a year for 6 years before I had to refinance. So $14,000 a year for 6 years, 14 times 2 is 28, 56, 66, 76, about $80,000 I would pay down if it was the $14,000, but it kept raising. It would go to zero in the next 8 years, but I had 6 years to pay it off. So it was probably around about $100,000 I would pay off in the next 6 years before I refinance. So because he wanted to get out, and because he wanted more than his home was worth, and because he had a background in real estate, so he understood what I was trying to do, he was okay with us structuring a deal where I made his payments for up to 6 years with a balloon payment to pay him off at the end of it in 2018. So since we structured it that way, I rented the property afterwards. His total payments were about $2,400-ish. And when I first started renting the property, I rented it out for about $1,800 a month. So I was in the hole $600 a month. But the way I saw that was I was making $600 payments directly into principal every month, and I was going to see that later. So over the next 6 years, as the property value rose, and we got to 2018 where it was time for me to refinance, and I had paid off most of his original loan's principal, we had only the $150,000 second loan on it, the HELOC, the home equity line of credit. Only that was left. And the property value, of course, since this was 2011 when I purchased it, the property value had gone up significantly. So it was $275 when I purchased it, was what it was worth, but I paid $315 for it without money out of my pocket. I paid $600 a month for 6 years for it, right? The property value had increased to over $400,000, so I had refinanced at around $400,000 in 2018, pulled the $600 a month over 6 years, so $600 a month times 12 months is like $7,200. So $7,200 times 6 is $42,000, call it $45,000, somewhere around there. Sorry, I'm doing quick numbers. $45,000. So I pulled the $45,000 out in a cash out refi, refinanced the property at a $400,000 value. So, and then I still had enough to get like a 20% down loan on the property because I owed so little. So I still had equity in the property. I only owed at that point, I believe I only owed the HELOC basically was $150, and then the $40,000 I put on top of that was that I took out, and then the other $40,000 that I owed him on top of what he owed initially. So when I refinanced, I paid off the $150 plus $40 is $190 plus another $40 is $230. But the place was worth $400,000, so I had $170,000 equity at that point in 6 years. So in 6 years, I paid myself back for every dollar I spent in the property, and I had made $170,000. And that is the story of how I purchased my first property with no money down. Probably should do more specific numbers for it next time rather than doing this off the top of my head. But if you structure it right and you find the right property and you find the right seller, you can do it. But it's not as easy as people on all these shows will tell you. You got to do the work. You got to not care where the property is. You got to find the right person. You got to spend 2 hours a day calling them. And then you found the right person. You can do something like that. I did it. I was only 24 at the time, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. I should have bought 10 of them. That's what I like to say. But yeah, that's the story. So hope you enjoyed that.